I think you'll enjoy this delightful conversation I had with Gary Vee about a wide variety of topics that you should find fascinating.
One of the great things that happened to me was I was born in the Soviet Union. I grew up in America. So propaganda was something I thought about all the time. Like when Ronald Reagan was president, I could sense that he was doing a good PR job. Like at 10, I understood. I was also very entrepreneurial, and very quickly in my early 20s, I'm like, ooh, everything is business. And all the stuff we now talk about, big food, big pharma, it was very, very intuitive to me in my 20s. And so I've lived my adult life taking everything with a grain of salt. I feel like that's becoming a more modern conversation as people are trying to figure out East, West, clean, historical versus modern. And, I do think people overcorrect the other way. I've got personal relationships who so have demonized modern medicine that they are no longer with us because they didn't do some things that they should have. I think a lot about finding the middle in all of this. It's funny. I think about business and marketing the way that you and I are discussing health right now. If you're worried about your body, why on earth would you not listen to your body? I find something very interesting about the medical industry, which is I find they like to fight each other on who's right. And I see it in marketing, and I tell a lot of marketing ideological professors or pontificators who also write books like I do. I go, wait a minute. If you're so good at marketing, why doesn't your book sell? People are incredibly non-contextual to history and incredibly cynical and pessimistic. And I do think the singular best medicine is practical optimism. I really believe that.
Welcome, everyone. Dr. Mercola helping you take control of your health. And today we have a bit of an unusual guest. Some of you may recognize him as Gary Vaynerchuk. And Gary is unusual in that he was not born in this country. He was born in Belarus, which is a country, if you are not aware, is in Eastern Europe. It borders Russia and Ukraine. And it reminds me of the time I spent last century. The last part of last century, I was in family practice in South Chicago, and my favorite patients were from Eastern Europe. Why? Because they knew health. They knew natural medicine. I didn't have to argue with them. They really understood that. And they brought deep family spiritual values to their family, which is an anomaly. I mean, it's certainly not rare, but it's certainly not common in the U.S., at least in my experience, due to a whole variety of social constructs that have happened. So, and I think that's plays a big role in why Gary's been so successful in what he's done. And I'll tell you what he's done if you don't, I'm not aware of him. And that's really what I wanted to explore, because I've heard him on a few other podcasts, and I was just so intrigued that he was so tuned in to this aspect of reality. And I, as I said, I think it's a really strong reason why he's so successful. And I'm not really interested in what he's successful with. It's just the process and how he can inspire you to a similar level of success with the path that he's taken. So what has he done? Well, when he came over, I think he was in single digits, like 5 or 6 when he came over from Belarus, and his father had a liquor store, and Gary helped him out because that's the way the families work. They work together, and he had developed something called Wine Library TV, which, he applied his innovation and his masterful use of the language and marketing and made it quite successful. And then I think 15 years ago, he ventured off into Vaynermedia, I think is what it is. And that's what his primary thing is now. And he's very prolific and very, very effective at what he does. And he's written a few books, and perhaps we can talk about those today. So, but he's widely known in many circles and a very respected influencer in this industry. So with all that, welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's a great pleasure to connect with you for the first time.
It's very humbling. Thank you for that intro. I'm excited to be with the audience, and thanks for reaching out.
Yeah. So, as I said, the primary intention was to explore some of your family roots and how you apply that to your current success. But that is just my only curiosity. But I'm really interested in anything that you would like to discuss that's on the, that's reached the top of your uh, issues for concerns, or you'd like to discuss. So I think we could start there. Where would you like to dive into? Because you got a lot of stuff to talk about. It's not hard to talk about things with you.
Buckle in, everyone. There's going to be a lot of energy here, a lot of jumping around. I think the thing you said in the beginning really caught my attention, because I've been talking a lot about it lately. Watching the world, our world, America, start to take on things that my babushka Anya used to talk about, my great-grandmother, when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 in America. When my great-grandmother Anya would visit us when we moved to New Jersey from Queens, she spent her whole life in Queens. When she came to America, she would visit once in a blue moon. She was already elderly. She was in her mid-70s when she immigrated to America. So, and Soviet 70s, which is, just for everybody listening, like 110-year-old today that you know. So, but she would come over. I remember this vividly. And when we would wake up, we were kids back then, me and my sister, we'd wake up at 7:38 in the morning, and she would literally grab us and make us go outside and walk on the grass in our bare feet. And then miraculously, the last 4 or 5 years, I've been seeing the New York, LA crowd start to talk about grounding and how we need to put our feet in the soil. And I mean anything from, if I burned my hand, I had to pee on it, to cold baths, to Wart St. John or whatever that is. They called it Zvitaboy. We would literally drive and have to pull off on the side of the highway and pick this root for like these weeds, what I thought, with yellow flowers on them. And then I look up years later, once I figured out what that was, when Google came along, and I'm like, oh, for depression and just everything. Cinnamon, my grandmother and great grandmother, cinnamon. And, it's really interesting. You mentioned me being the son of a merchant and the family business thing. Like, yeah, it's, and then you not having to fight the people from Czechoslovakia or Poland or Russia. Like, I'm very affected by my upbringing. It is my framework. Now, like anything, and you'll probably smile at this, everything's great if it's within balance. I was also taught to never go to the doctor ever for my whole life. Like, you're just going to
they got it because they knew the truth. So, they knew the truth.
Never go. And also just no foreign chemicals. I mean, when I tell you, doctor, if I take 2 Advil right now, I'm unconscious. So, I think that might be a fun place to start if you want to dig into. But I do think, whether it's the foods or the things you put into your body or how you interact with nature. I also remember my family being weird, or so I thought, as a kid in the 80s in America. We'd go to Sandy Hook, the beach, and my family would be immediately run in and grab the sand from the bottom of the ocean and scrub your face with it. And so, and by the way, the other thing, literally anytime I wasn't feeling well for the first 15 years of my life, my parents would say, my mom specifically, or my grandma, drink some tea and go to sleep. Drink some tea and go to sleep. So, yeah, I think, if you want to go down that angle, boy, am I a byproduct.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for validating my observations as a physician, that I really delighted when I had a patient from Eastern Europe, because it was never an argument. They understood the value of nature. They never abandoned or were brainwashed or manipulated by the media and Rockefeller medicine that there's, for every symptom, there's a drug for it. No, they embraced these ancient traditions that had great value because they replicated nature.
When I tell you, I was also not, probably unlike you, based on how your life played out. I was very entrepreneurial, and I was obsessed with history. But man, when I tell you, starting in 4th grade, I don't know if I ever listened to a single thing in science. My brain didn't work that way. And so what that meant was I was very clean and clear-headed. And when I say no joke, if you found me at 18 when I went away to college, the way I thought about medicine was literally, if you asked 18-year-old me in 1993, talk about medicine, I was aware of Tylenol and Benadryl. But when I tell you, my initial answers would be ginger, cinnamon, mint, red beets. When I used to have a chest cold, my mom would put vodka on a rag and heat it up and put it on my chest. No Vicks, vapor, like it's just real ancient, historical ways of doing stuff. And it's been very interesting, especially because my fiance is very into health and wellness and very clean living. So many of her favorite things are just like, and I hear her and she does a lot of research and I'm like, oh, that's why. Oh, that's for blood pressure, right? My grandma had blood pressure. No wonder she cared about X, Y, or fruit or.
So how was that growing up as a child and a teenager? Because your experience was quite different from your peers.
I've got a good one for you, especially now that I watch youth grow up. I analyze a lot of Gen Alpha, Gen Z for a living for marketing, but it led to psychology and perspective and real social anthropology. I'll give you a really interesting answer for it. You know how it was?
Very light. In what way?
By not having a constant conversation of needing to go to urgent care or the hospital or Googling or thinking that you had to take chemicals every time anything happened, my life was light. It was just, it felt like, it's scary to me how much I thought that this is a really interesting way to put it. I just remembered something I haven't thought about in 30 years. This is why I love doing stuff like this. I used to think of my body like a superhero. Do you know how, like, in some comic books or fictional movies, like if the superhero character got their thumb cut off, the thumb would just grow back in? I literally grew up thinking that if I did nothing, that it would fix itself.
Do you know why?
I assume you'll never believe why I think I'm bringing this up.
Of course.
Do you want to hear why? 3 weeks ago, I jammed my thumb playing basketball very badly. And my physical therapist or my friends, or my admins, they were like, let's put some ice on it. It really swelled up.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it. Okay. And I didn't do it. And a week later, my trainer said, it's interesting that you didn't do the ice thing, because I've been reading a lot about how the body naturally does it, and it's, it swells up to protect you, and like it's a natural cast, and it was just interesting the way he was talking about it. And he said some people are now debating that you're actually better off not icing it, and the body, and it really sparked that thought. And now we're talking about this, and I'm like, and that's just how it came to mind. Thoughts?
Yeah, the reason why you felt that your body could essentially recover from virtually any assault on you, outside of a bullet to the head or something outrageously egregious.
Sure. Correct.
Because it does. You were witnessing truth. You weren't brainwashed and propagandized with deceptive information, because that is exactly what our bodies are designed to do, to stay healthy. They were not designed to get sick and disease. You should not have a pain anywhere in your body, ideally, or as much energy as you want. And at 70 years old, that's exactly what I experienced. I don't have a pain any day, unless I injure myself for some reason. Like you strained your thumb.
Do you know what has taken a lot of pain out of my body?
Weed. I'm just kidding.
This goes back to Tylenol. I've never done even a healthy drug like weed, which I'm pretty pro for a lot of people. Soft tissue and fascia work.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that. Is that something you know about? Because I'll tell you, if we're talking about different health and wellness things on
Well,
the
we can talk
show,
whatever you're interested in. I
that
mean,
I'm interested in everything. So it's
yeah.
curiosity is
That's
maybe the
another
thing I'm
characteristic
most.
of healthy people. They're perpetually curious. Yeah,
Oh, interesting.
yeah. But you have to have enough
Um,
energy to be curious. And most people
well,
don't
it's
have
funny you
enough
said that.
energy. That's the problem because they're metabolically poisoned.
It's funny. It's funny you said that. It's where my brain went because I also think about perspective
Mhm.
and optimism in the form of health and of health. Like I believe my optimistic point of view on everything has an incredible impact on my health.
Sure. Goes both ways.
Kind of
Yeah.
intuitively,
Yeah.
intuitively. Yeah, makes sense. No, I grew up in my
Mhm.
daddy's liquor store. And so I got into very bad habits and really hurt myself, hurt my back, my QL, like really, really interesting. But I would say soft tissue and fascia work has given me, you know, a not yeah, I'll say it this way, a new lease on life. I've always felt healthy, but I definitely had aches and pains and mobility issues until I got serious about that 7-10 years ago. And it's been a
Yeah, I
blessing.
think they're very powerful tools and certainly better than doing nothing. And the challenge that most of us have is that we get engaged in doing our work, and our work doesn't any way, shape, or form resemble what our ancestors' work did, which is going out and creating food and farming and moving all day long. We don't do that. So as a result, there's a consequence for not honoring that ancestral principle. And one of the
That's
consequences,
right.
the aches and pains you describe, and fascial and deep tissue work can certainly solve that. I think there's better ways to do that are more natural, that engage
Tell me.
in practices somewhat similar to yoga, although I think yoga's been I mean, I think it's overstating that it's a perversion, but it's definitely less than ideal. And there's many value. I have enormous respect for yoga, but I don't think it's ideal. In fact, I'm in the process of developing something called 22nd century yoga, which is a form of mobility medicine, but just engaging in these regular daily movements yourself, not having someone do it on you or for you. You can correct
Yes,
that by yourself. Yeah. So
I
I think
believe that.
it's okay, but there's a better step. There's a better process.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a buyer because I would say that up front, to your point, working through the
Mm-hmm.
things of that nature was really a reliever. But then to your point, then you start for me, I can speak to myself. It was very clear that that was quote unquote a short term
Yeah.
high reward up front, but then diminishing returns. And to your point, like, not that I know exactly what forms I'm doing because it's above my pay grade, but I, from a mobility standpoint and a stretching and a working on things, like it's so interesting how natural. I mean, I will stretch in impromptu
Yes.
ways now in
Listen to
my
your
day to.
body. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Listen,
So, and
that's when I say that
yeah,
is my framework. I basically
yeah,
only
that's the
listen
best
to my body.
strategy. If more people do that, the health of the world would change overnight. Overnight.
Let me give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
This morning, my trainer now
Mm-hmm.
moved to Minnesota. He's my personal trainer. I'm his client, but he moved to Minnesota to be with his family, and so we do more virtual.
Mm-hmm.
He's in town this week. It's a real gift. It's my favorite time. We
Mm-hmm.
get to work out together. He's leaving today. This morning, when I woke up, I could tell I needed a
Mm-hmm.
little more sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Not lazy,
No,
not
no, you just
not
needed it.
I, I just know, and I'm not willing if I have any optionality, including not taking advantage of him being here fully because we still got a little time in together this morning. But I'm very passionate going to sleep. I've gone to sleep at 9:30 on a Friday night when I had some real fun things to do or things I had to do. So sleep is probably the place, and eating are the two places where I refuse to not listen to
Mm.
my body. I will steamroll anything if I feel like I need to go to sleep or sleep more. Um, I just, or the flip side, the
Mm.
complete opposite. I have a rare weekend when I can sleep in, but I woke up at 7:45 instead of 10:13, which would be my hope and dreams of what would have happened. I'm just incredibly comfortable. When people say, how much do you sleep or when do you sleep? I'm like, it's pretty all over the place.
Yeah. So that's a pretty interesting observation. And, when you violate that inner wisdom that your body communicates with you, then there's a price for that. And I'm just noticing some of the musculoskeletal challenges you had. It may be related to, I think it's a mistake most of us make. I used to make it. I had intractable back pain for many years. And I tried, being a physician and tied into the natural healing practices, I tried dozens of different strategies. None of them worked. None of them worked. Not even short term. A lot of pain. And then I finally woke up one day and realized that it was because I was sitting down too much. The moment I started standing up, it hurts to stand up, but
when I tell you there is nothing, I know more. I know very little. Like I know a lot of stuff, but not in this space. There is no doubt in my mind that there's a 100% direct correlation to sitting and all the issues I had. I mean, not only that, it's very clear that my psoas was a huge issue. And it's funny. I talk about myself with people ask me, what's your process? I say from smoke to fire. And they're like, what does that mean? I go, well, when I have an observation that I want to do something about, I don't go right to it the next day. I definitely am self-aware enough to know that it metabolizes with myself a little bit, especially if it's not something I want to do. It's really funny you bring up the standing because it's very clear to me that has been a major issue for me. And standing desk, more walking. And this goes back to even when you talked earlier about, I don't think you need to do that. Like that's exactly where my brain went. I'm like, movement is such an underrated.
There's just a few principles that we radically benefit from if we follow them. And the converse of that is that there's a downside if you don't follow them, but moving and to take it the next level. And you may be unconsciously making this, what I believe is a pretty serious mistake, but it can be combined with movement. It has to be outside in the sunlight, which most of the people in Eastern Europe that I treated, they knew that. And they were outside regularly, especially around solar noon, because the sun is a source of nutrition for us. And it's different type of nutrition. It's photons and it's different wavelengths that nourish our body. And if we don't get those, vitamin D is one, of course, but there's near infrared radiation, which does enormous things to the water in your body. It turns it into gel water, structured water. And if you don't get that exposure, your health starts to decline. But it's basic and there's no charge for it. There's no cost except your time. That's it.
What about, I'd love to get your take on this. This is now more just I'm jamming. I'm having some fun with this. On the flip side, one thing that I think went incredibly well for me is I really had I still have a very good relationship with
germs.
Meaning.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Yeah. If you have a healthy immune system, you should.
I wonder if this was a common trait of the Eastern European. I don't know if this was unique to my household, but it seemed like all the Russian immigrants and cousins and second cousins were doing the same, which is I just didn't wash my hands as much, and Perel. And then the other thing with me, specifically with me, that was a little bit different was since I've been 7 or 8 to right now, I'm doing it now. I bite my nails for the last 40 years of my life. I just figure like how much germs we're getting. Like, I feel like, I don't know. I mean, it's incredible to me how infrequent I struggle with any kind of cold and I also travel for a lot in my life. I just feel like something happened where I got germed out in a really good way early on where like, I don't know.
Well, there's actually, you probably aren't aware of it, but there's something called the hygiene hypothesis, which has been popularized for a decade or two at least. And the hypothesis goes that if you're overly hygienic and assiduous and just almost obsessive compulsive with hygiene and cleaning, washing your hands and cleaning all your surfaces with antiseptics, those people don't do as well from immune infection because you need.
That is the most intuitive thing. Like I used to call my friends bubble babies. Sure. You've always been sick. And I'm like, I know why you're sick. Like, you wipe down everything. Everything's wiped down, wiped down. I'm like, I think it's bad. I mean, I don't like to talk about things above my pay grade, so I never really fully went there. But that feels very right to me.
No, absolutely. It's because you were given amazing training from your parents and your grandparents.
Doctor, when we talk about media, like, one of the great things that happened to me was I was born in the Soviet Union. I grew up in America. So propaganda was something I thought about all the time. Like when Ronald Reagan was president, I was a young kid. I could sense that he was doing a good PR job. Like at 10, I understood. Just to remind everybody, he won 49 of 50 states in the 84 election. You know how insane that is by today's standards? And Gorbachev and my parents and everything was a conspiracy theory in Russia. But it is funny. I was also very entrepreneurial, and very quickly in my early 20s, I'm like, ooh, everything is business. I was just very obvious to me, like everything is business. And all the stuff we now talk about, big food, big pharma, it was very, very intuitive to me in my 20s. And so I've lived my adult life taking everything with a grain of salt. I feel like that's becoming a more modern conversation as people are trying to figure out East, West, clean, historical versus modern. And, I do think people overcorrect the other way. I've got personal relationships who so have demonized modern medicine that they are no longer with us because they didn't do some things that they should have that probably could have helped them. So I think a lot about finding the middle in all of this. Thoughts?
Well, ultimately, trusting your body to figure it out. And it's not that you abandon rationality and data. You certainly need to take that into consideration, but to blindly trust experts other than your body is a very foolish choice in my perspective.
Yeah. Was there anything that, you were observing from afar that you thought would be interesting to double click on that we haven't touched on yet?
We've talked about health, and that's clearly not your forte. It's just, it was an interesting discussion because of your upbringing. But no, I'd like to dive into some of the things that you are expert on, that you have exceptional knowledge. It's you're a leader and an innovator and an influencer in these. So, I'd like to discuss some of those things, whatever's on your radar.
Well, I think the things. So everybody, I know a lot of this audience may not be aware of me. I would tell you that, what I'm really aware of is that what people have latched on to me for is around entrepreneurship and marketing. But it's interesting. It's kind of the energy of this conversation. I think what I've done well is communicate to people about incredible truths instead of things that I really do find that the last 50 years of not only health and wellness, but in marketing, and I think the last 10 years have been fruitful. I think people are getting a lot more alternative knowledge from the way the internet works and things of that nature. But I think I'm incredibly practical. It's funny. I think about business and marketing the way that you and I are discussing health right now. If you're worried about your body, why on earth would you not listen to your body? I have all these, you'll find this interesting because you come from this industry that I think has similar dynamics. I find something very interesting about the medical industry, which is I find they like to fight each other on who's right. And I see it in marketing, and I tell a lot of marketing ideological professors or pontificators who also write books like I do. I go, wait a minute, if you're so good at marketing, why doesn't your book sell? And, I grew up learning marketing by trying to help my father's liquor store do more business, because that's what you do for your family business. And so since I was 6 years old, I've come to realize I've been obsessed with attention. Let me explain what I mean. What I find amazing about what you and I are doing right now is you and I couldn't do this 40 years ago. Two humans that had passion or expertise for things couldn't get to the world. We needed to have a gatekeeper say that we'll interview you or we'll give you 3 minutes on this show. But no one had platforms. And so I've been focused on attention my whole life. And now that every platform allows for attention, that is a remarkable change in the world. So, for example, I believe that what I was doing as 6, which was paying attention to where the cars that were driving by my lemonade stand would most likely listen to or look at, not listen. What tree or post would they most look at to see that my lemonade was 25 cents? And so from that day on to today, I spend all of my time trying to understand where consumer attention is. What are they paying attention to? What do they look at? Which platforms? Is it direct mail? Is it Google? Is it YouTube? Is it TikTok? And so my great passion is understanding where attention is and then communicating in practical, optimistic terms what we are talking about. So, for example, I broke out in the early 2000s doing a wine show on YouTube called Wine Library TV. Why did that break out? 3 reasons. 1, I was deeply knowledgeable and passionate about wine at that point. So you need to have that, just like what you do for a living. 2, I spoke about wine in a way that no one had ever spoken about it before. Wine was put on a very elitist pedestal. And as you probably know through your life, people are intimidated by wine, right? Like, oh, I don't know what to like, what you pick the wine. The wine list goes around at a nice dinner and everyone passes around like a hot potato because they're scared of it. So I wanted to make it less intimidating. And I really spoke about it in very casual terms. And I would compare it to things that people knew. Instead of talking about a wine tasting like an esoteric cassis from the south of France, I would say, that grape Jolly Rancher you loved as a kid? I made it relatable. And finally, I used a new medium. I was able to use YouTube when it first came out, when nobody really knew how big it was going to be, to reach a lot more people than, let's say, the New York Times dining in section. I believe the framework that I started for wine is what I do now. I have a marketing company called VaynerMedia that works with the biggest companies in the world to do their marketing in social and traditional channels. But I feel passionate for the people that are listening that are entrepreneurial. I couldn't explain to them. I just actually wrote a new book called Day Trading Attention, which is really my thesis. And I couldn't explain to everyone here how great of an opportunity everybody has to reach audience for the first time, really in the history of distribution and media and creative. But it's different than social media the last 15 years, in the last 2 years. For the first 15 years, it was like email marketing. You would have to mass a lot of followers, and then you would post and a percentage of them would see it. We now live in a new era where it's really profound. Every individual piece of content on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Instagram has the potential to reach a very broad audience based on its individual quality of the piece of content, not on how many followers you have. This is a level of meritocracy of information and entertainment that we have never seen in the history of the world. And I could not, and I mean could not, recommend more for people to get very serious about organic social media, meaning social media you just post. You don't even have to run media ads on it. And for you and your platform, and for everybody who's listening, the expertise around doing social media creative better per platform. The same video on Facebook will act differently on Instagram, and will act differently on Snapchat, and will act differently on TikTok. And I want people to get greater at it.
I agree. And, that was my experience too, because I was on YouTube probably about the time that you started, and developed a following because of a similar passion in a different industry, but essentially similar process. And that I didn't use the jargon of the medical profession, but communicated in simple lay terms. But then the point I want to ask is, it seems like the last 5 years, things have changed quite dramatically. Perhaps not in your industry, but certainly in health, which is a direct competitor to big pharma. So there's massive censorship and deplatforming that essentially limits the truth or information that was uncensored from growing. I mean, we had literally for thousands of keywords, we had never paid to have it optimized. Just organically, we're number one for thousands of keywords in Google. But they gradually changed the algorithms because identified me as a threat to the existing industries and the supporters of their platform. I wasn't supporting Google, never did, never will. But so that, they outed me and many others. It's just not just me, of course. There's many, many others, hundreds, thousands of others who've been similarly taken off the platform, almost to the point where now it's somewhat akin to the burning of the Library of Alexandria, where this knowledge is gone. And there's a fear. I was afraid of this, that it would happen. It would disappear forever. But thankfully, I've now come to understand, just recently in the last few months or so, this is not going to happen. That thankfully there is an emerging shift from the traditional search engines. They are essentially dinosaurs, and they don't know it yet. They're dinosaurs.
Well, not only is that true, one of the most interesting things about search is, this is where AI gets
that's
real
where I was going to next. 100%. OpenAI is going to has at this point they've won. Google is gone. OpenAI is going to crush them.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think obviously you have your history with Google. Now that I'm learning on here, like, look, Google is a very, very advanced company, and they have their own AIs. But
they were the leader, but they lost it because they had integrity glitches. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, I think listen, Sam Altman with OpenAI, was at the forefront in a real significant way. Here's what I find fascinating about this conversation. It'll be interesting to see where the audience feels about this. I think people are really bad at history.
Which is a passion of yours.
It is. And it's a passion of mine, and I never understood it. I was a very poor student. But I really overexcelled in history. And I've come to realize, probably only in the last 5 to 7 years, the way I need context and I need pattern recognition. That's how I process. And I must have intuitively, this goes back to listen to the body and I must have realized this thing's going to work for me. And I really, really think about this a lot. I think about the information. I think a lot. It's funny you bring up the libraries and the burnings. It's amazing how much the world we currently live in today is based on which books were printed most at first when the printing press was created. So much of what we're feeling in geopolitics and changed perceptions and many good things, many bad things, the rise of ludicrous conspiracy theories that people fully buy into, all the way to your point, things that are historically tried and true that can now find their way back into the world because the mediums and the media can't fully control everyone's point of view. I mean, I don't think people realize how short of a window the last 60, 70, 80 years is in the scheme of things. But for most people, it's their entire frame. I mean, I hear silly things all the time. I literally, probably multiple times a day, have conversations with people, definitely multiple times a week, to not over hyperbolize, where somebody will say, it's never been this bad in the world. I do exactly what you just did. Obviously, there's a lot in the air geopolitically and things of that nature. Like, I had to say to somebody recently, I'm like, you do know there was a Holocaust, right? Like, and this during COVID, I had to have some conversations with overreacting friends that may have not been. I was like, you should like. I remember this one conversation early when I had a friend that was hysterical and we're all going to die, and I was like, it's never been worse. And I'm like, please just Google the Black Plague and watch a video for an hour. Like, people are incredibly non-contextual to history and incredibly cynical and pessimistic And I do think the singular best medicine is practical optimism. I really believe that.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
I just wish people could find balance, because you have anger and resentment. And I I know one day. So a couple of things that are interesting to me. I know that I turned on Netflix the other night and I saw a documentary about gut health trending in the top 10. And I was happy to hear that. I actually, again, above my pay grade, not my interest graph, but I'm aware, I'm fascinated by gut health. I'm more personally fascinated by intuition and the fact that I believe the gut is actually your primary brain and your brain is secondary.
That's accurate. It really is accurate, more than you can appreciate, because, well, from a number of fronts, and two primary ones, is that your gut, and I didn't appreciate this until recently, but I couldn't agree with you more. It is the primary way that you obtain health. And I would say 97 to 98% of the public does not have good gut health. It correlates real strongly with metabolic flexibility, or the ability to optimally generate cellular energy. They're intimately related. And if you don't have good gut health, you can't connect to your gut, which is a sort of a euphemistic way of saying you can't connect to your energy or your intuition. They're intimately connected. Intimately.
Makes sense, because I'm in a very good place with both. So a focus group of one, boy, did that hit. I didn't realize there was a correlation there on that.
Intimate correlation. They're wrapped around like this, and it's not there's no reason you should be, because it's not commonly understood. Yeah.
Fascinating. Anyway, this was too enjoyable. I apologize that I need to run to my next thing.
Delightful. And you got another book too. Why don't you show us your other book? You got another book?
Oh yes, I do have another book. I have a kid's book coming out. Wait a minute. I'm so glad you said this. This will make so much sense if everyone's been listening. I have a kid's book that's coming out, literally titled "Meet Me in the Middle." Literally titled "Meet Me in the Middle." It's a story of patient pig and eager eagle. Patience is maybe my top 5 favorite traits in a human being. However, extreme patience sounds like one of the words that a lot of people, when they hear me talk about patience, think that I'm talking about non-action, or that I'm talking about, laziness. And I keep telling people there's a reason that there are separate words, laziness and patience. They're not the same. Flip side, when people see eager is an incredibly tenacity, eager ambition, like the hat I'm wearing. Beautiful words. Out of balance, you can really be frantic and sloppy and cause yourself a lot of anxiety. And so, I created V Friends. It's my Sesame Street meets Pokemon to help kids and parents finally find the middle, because everything can be great in balance, and most things aren't great when they're out of balance.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us, and really appreciate everything you're doing, and best of luck to continue on your journey. Thanks so much for watching. Remember, hit the like and subscribe button so you can get more videos that can help you and your family take control of your health.